Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. This is the fourth and final part for today, Tuesday, March 26, 2013. Alright, I'm going to continue here. Topless feminists and gay rights protest at Vatican. 4 activists from the Ukrainian feminist group Femen have stripped off from St. Peter's Square in protest for gay rights, just as Pope Benedict was reciting his traditional weekly Angelus prayer. The 4 topless women had "Shut Up" scrawled on their fronts and "In Gay We Trust" on their backs. "Homophobes, shut up," the activists shouted as the Pope was speaking yesterday. Here you have police trying to stop a feminine activist from protesting on St. Peter's Square. So she's being oppressed, I guess. The Women's Power Group has been making headlines since 2010 for topless feminists, pro-democracy, and anti-corruption protests in Russia, Ukraine, and Britain. Here's another picture of them. A pilgrim reacts to the feminist group Feminist protests. Anti-Feminists protest domestic violence awareness ads in Dallas. This is actually from 2008. Most of these articles are pretty recent, but it still ties into it what we were talking about making the husband into like a wife beater. It says here that men's rights advocate Glenn Sachs has gotten some press for protesting these ads. It says here, which were created by the Family Place and were displayed on buses in Dallas through November 30th. When I grow up, it says, I will beat my wife. Men who witness domestic violence as children are twice as likely to abuse their wives. Break the cycle of domestic violence. Then the second one, the text of the ad says, one day my husband will kill me. Girls who grow up in households with domestic violence are more likely to end up with abusive partners. Break the cycle of domestic violence. The Family Place created 3 ads all depicting female victim, male abuser situations. I wish they had done a 4th ad showing a boy child is a future victim. Men are a minority of victims of intimate violence, but minority doesn't mean non-existence. There are male victims of intimate violence who require assistance, and there seems to be virtually no outreach to abused men. Feminists to protest anti-abortion group's prize. It says activists set to demonstrate against Jerusalem conference for awarding a prize to Efrat, an anti-abortion organization. The group of feminists plan to protest outside the conference over the decision to award a prize to an anti-abortion organization. They say they try to provide women with alternatives to abortion, including financial support and counseling. Detractors accuse the organization of brainwashing and preying on women during an emotional and vulnerable time. It says here that a protester or organizer said the worst part is that they're using women for demographics. Why shouldn't a woman have an abortion? Because we need the baby, so there are more Jews, and so there are more Israeli soldiers, so we can defend the land and continue the occupation, in parentheses, expansion. She added that the organization works only with Jewish women rather than Arab, Druze, or Christian women, which illustrates they care only about politics and not about women's health. No, they care about their tribe, and to be honest with you, I don't blame them. But see, they're talking about women's health, so you got to have women's reproductive health, provide contraceptives. See, and they scare people into that, right? Because they just assume that people aren't monogamous and they're being promiscuous and having fun. They want to have careers, and if they're lucky, if the guys still have sperm swimming and girls are still having eggs that can be fertilized by the time they're done with achieving their career status and then they're gaining their independence, that to be able to have children. That you want to avoid, HIV and STDs and AIDS. But really, when they say protection, they're talking about protection from unplanned pregnancies and creating life. That's what they're talking about. That's the danger. We tell them we know that women who have abortions are very sorry about it later, and it never goes away, they said. Also, it goes on and says that the director, of the conference said, we found it especially necessary to award them the prize this year because of the unfair opposition from the public and the media over the past year. Then we have nude Femen activists attacked by French right-wing anti-gay protesters. Most of you probably have seen this about in France. In France, actually, they've had a lot of anti-abortion or pro-life protests, or basically real grassroots stuff against legislation that's going on there. The French government, you don't hear it too much in the mainstream media though, the French government announced Monday it would show no tolerance for the kind of violent acts carried out by far-right protesters against members of the Ukrainian feminist movement Femen. So it was during the protests on Sunday in Paris, organized by the Catholic group Cavitas against French President Holland's plan to legalize gay marriage. So, and this was from November of last year. Femen members confronted the protest dressed as nuns and with painted slogans across their bare chests, including "In Gay We Trust" and basically "F God." Some sprayed what appeared to be powder towards the Catholic marchers. So, a representative from the French government said they were profoundly shocked by the acts of violence, saying that there was no place for extreme right violence in this country. Miss America protests, this is where a lot of it started, or this is one of their big events back in the day. Feminists at the Miss America pageant that took place on September 7, 1968 was no ordinary pageant. Hundreds of feminist activists showed up on the Atlantic City boardwalk to enact their Miss America protests. So they distributed materials titled "No More Miss America." Prominent feminists who participated included Carol Hanisch, who originally had the idea to protest the pageant, as well as Robin Morgan and Kathy Sarachild. So what's wrong with Miss America? And the complaints was it judges women on impossible standards of beauty. The protesters called the standards ludicrous, which I tend to agree with some of these things. But this is the result of a modern society, of consumerism, of the fashion industry, the culture industry. This is what it is the result of. It's not the result of something that's been grassroots again. It says the pageant objectifies women and thereby harms all women. They dislike the hypocrisy of the pageant, the double standard of Madonna whore fantasy in which men irrationally demand that women be innocent and beautiful while also satisfying the men's lust. That's pretty interesting that they just assume that all men want whores. Madonna, I know what you're talking about. She's the Kabbalist, and she knows exactly what she's doing. Like when she's wearing the Boy Scouts uniform that looks totally ridiculous on her to protest against the Boy Scouts private organization and their right to say that they don't want gay, basically scout leaders. Considered the pageant racist for never having any black Miss America. They opposed the Vietnam War and felt the pageant supported it by sending the Miss America winner to Vietnam to entertain the troops. It was blatant inequality, encouraging girls to grow up to become Miss America. The standard line in the U.S. to any boy was that he could grow up to be the president. Why not women? So, pretty interesting. And now they're on the front lines having babies, fighting for the empire. So, it's just ridiculous. Topless feminists protest against. That's why I'm just trying to show and lay out this argument proof that this is where useful idiots are used. Topless feminists protest against International Olympic Committee in London. And it says here you can go in there and check it out. Members of the Ukrainian women's rights group Femen staged a topless protest against the International Olympic Committee outside City Hall in the South Bank, Thames. Sorry, I always mispronounce that, in London. They say Femen claims that the IOC collaborates with violent Islamic states. Femen promotes new feminism throughout topless protests from March 21st, 2013, and Gay We Trust. So, LGBT, what is that? Equality? Either way, feminist activist group has garnered international attention for their nude and topless protests of government organizations and churches in the name of a new feminism, but many question whether they are indeed a renaissance of the women's movement. Yeah, it's like I said, they're useful idiots, so no, they're not. They're just pawns. It's a top-down, it's not grassroots. It's, it says, of course, it was founded by Ukraine college students to organize to protest the country's booming sex trades. While the first protesters were fully clothed and mostly ignored, it says here they explained that the group decided to pursue a vastly more eye-catching strategy showing skin. So we realized we had to do something really radical, so the end justified the means. In their manifestos and statements, Femen says their intent is to bring disorder, neurosis, and panic to the patriarchal men. She's a student with a background in gender studies. If that's the primary goal, then I'm confident they will be successful. Whether it does things to actually create social progress, it says that's what they're skeptical of. I think the topless tactic is brilliant. It immediately confronts our culture and media with the basic fact that females are oppressed. If men protested topless, there would be no controversy because they don't have boobs. I don't know if that person knows that or not, but Ukrainian topless feminists to protest in Africa and South America. So, and, here we go. It has Ukrainian feminist group Femen are taking their topless protests around the world, having already stripped off in their Western Europe to highlight a range of issues for democratic violations to sexual exploitation. This is from March 7th, 2013. So they have little support at home. And now they go to even further afield. They go to North Africa and South America. See, South America, they're kind of conservative. They don't want that crap. Africa, North Africa, they don't want that crap. So that's where they're going to go. In September, it launched its first training center in Paris to propagate its brand of new feminism. Another activist has moved to Berlin to run a German branch of Femen. Of course, they're in what? They're tied in with Russia's riot ban. They say that Femen represents a third wave of feminism. Some academics see the group as successors to the 19th century suffragettes and the women's rights movements of the 1970s. The feminist group trains female activists in violent naked protest techniques. Known for their topless protesters, Femen is a worldwide movement against patriarchy, but they are activists, it says, but are the activist breasts obscuring the message? This is from March 20th, 2013. They say Femen's aims are straightforward, broad, and radical, a war on patriarchy on three fronts, calling for an end to all religions, dictatorships, and the sex industry. At the Paris headquarters, one of the leaders says she's given instructions on the correct stance: feet apart, firmly rooted, aggressive. Feminine warriors never smile, she says. They are not there to please anyone. They say the movement is non-violent. They call it peaceful terrorism. From March 26 today, topless Tunisian activist safe after death threats. The lawyer denies reports that she was sent to a psychiatric hospital. Tunisian women who prompted an outcry and death threats by posting provocative topless photos of herself online is safe at home. Her lawyer tells Tunisia Live, contradicting reports she had been sent to a psychiatric hospital. She made started a firestorm 2 weeks ago by posting photos of feminist messages scrawled across her naked chest. My body belongs to me and is not the source of honor of anyone. She said in English, F your morals. That prompted some of her family to publicly disown her, and a prominent Salafist cleric told a Tunisian newspaper that she should be punished with 80 to 100 lashes, even stoned to death. They say the head of Tunisia's wing of the feminist group Femen told The Atlantic that Tyler's family had sent her to a psychiatric hospital, but those claims were later basically shot down. Of course it doesn't have to be met with all those lashes. You disown her, right? But then they have to bring in that extreme Salafist Sunni Muslim side to it. Missouri Republican LGBT people deserve the rights to be themselves. This is what she's saying. Missouri lawmaker said Tuesday she supported protecting LGBT people from discrimination because of Republican beliefs, not in spite of them. She says there really are gay people and they exist and they deserve the same rights as all of us do. That is plain and simple the way we should live our lives. It says right now you can be fired, evicted from your apartment, or kicked out of a restaurant just because you're LGBT. So they're going to use the government to force people to accept them. It says here it would introduce anti-discrimination laws to cover sexual orientation and gender identity. Canadian Parliament passes transgender anti-discrimination law that make it illegal to discriminate against transgender people. That was from March 22nd. Psychiatry's new normal, transgendered persons. The American Psychiatric Association drops gender identity disorder from its official classification of mental illnesses as they drive for acceptance of sex reassignment surgery advances from March 22nd. Activists were elated in the LGBT community. They had lobbied the APA for the change for years. A recent policy document from the State Commissioner of Education stated that public schools should allow their students to choose which bathrooms and locker rooms they use on the basis of their gender self-identification and not their anatomy. So you're discriminating. Transgenderism is the new normal. That's what they're saying. Being straight, no longer normal, says students. New education minister, I believe this is in Australia, said the government is committed to stamping out homophobic bullying in schools, but his department won't approve teaching material aimed at stamping out heterosexualism. So you can't really accuse him of being a heterophobe, right? Gay marriage is a minority issue, says British judge. I've covered this many times. But it goes on here, says a high court judge criticized the British government for focusing on the minority issue of gay marriage instead of the crisis of family breakdown in society. It says a breakdown of marriage and its impact on society affects 99% of the society. That's where the investment of time and money should be, where we really do need resources. Hardcore lesbian porn found in children's book Otherworld published for Isle of Man charity. A children's book published to raise money for charity has been withdrawn from sale after 22 pages of hardcore lesbian porn were accidentally printed inside. So 3,000 copies sold since 2011. Supreme Court gay marriage cases could set stage for dramatic societal changes. Supreme Court decision will have the potential to transform American society and the status of gays and lesbians in it. And a Pew poll says American approval of Supreme Court hits an all-time low. Thank you.